Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. You give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first four sharpening the axe. Abraham Lincoln. Our guest today, uh, a friend, close mentor with one of our regular guests, the one and only Austin Duchesne. Sharpens axes for a living metaphorically. He's been actually an advisor and an entrepreneur and a business leader in his industry for over 40 years. Founder of CDK Enterprises and over eight businesses that actually have become entrepreneurial ventures, over 100,000 homes and multifamily units in his career. And Dave Krawczyk is here today to teach us a bit about his industry in the construction development space and leadership and what it means to be an advisor to his customers and his clients. Dave, thanks for joining us today. I'm very intrigued by your business and how you came up with the idea to actually work with these developers. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm excited to do this.
Now, when I looked at in the beginning of your career, you actually were in framing. Was that correct?
Well, actually, my career spans throughout various aspects of what I'll call the residential home building industry. So I started early on in the building materials supply. So working in lumber yards and material distribution businesses. That part of my career culminated, actually, I had two peaks during that period. One, I was one of the founding members of a concept in California called Contractors Warehouse, which sold building material supplies to renovation contractors in Southern California. From there, I ultimately became the president of that company and expanded it into the Midwest. And at the time I left, we had 16 locations doing about $400 million a year in sales. I went from there and took on the lead role at a existing building material supplier called Wicks Lumber. And Wicks was struggling in the Midwest due to all kinds of competitive disadvantages they had, and became the president of Wicks Lumber and took them from 800 million in sales with a loss of about 6 million annually on
Wow.
800 million to a billion two and over a $50 million profit in 4 years. So it was during that stretch, to address, your first question about framing, that Wix had one of the concepts we implemented was a lot of turnkey services for the home builders. So things like providing wall panelization, roof trusses, framing crews. And we actually developed a process called Frame a Home in a Day, where we pre-built all of the portions of a residential structure in a plant, delivered them to a job site, and a 5-man crew could stand a 2,800 square foot house in 10 hours.
Wow.
So after leaving Wix, I founded CDK Enterprises, and that was back in 2001. Um, and a couple of interesting things with CDK is I originally founded it to obviously consult directly with single family home builders because that was my background and experience. I partnered with Chicago's largest home builder at the time, a company by the name of Newman Homes. They're no longer in existence. But partnering with them, what we ended up doing is we opened up the country's largest component manufacturing facility in Chicago, and that plant built 8 houses a day in the plant. And we had framing crews, which is what you alluded to in your first question, framing crews that would go out, 5-man crews, So obviously we had 40 to 50 framers. And we'd stand those houses in a single day and continue that process. We were doing 2,000 units a year with them. So it was a pretty exciting time and extremely innovative at the time.
When you worked your way into the role of the president of that first organization, what were some of the early lessons?
With Contractors Warehouse,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, what was really interesting about Contractors Warehouse, that was back it was I had moved from New England to California specifically for that opportunity. And it was back in 1983, just to kind of set the stage. And at that time,
Reaganomics.
huh?
Is that Reaganomics? I don't know.
Yeah, Reaganomics, you're right. I mean, California was a different place at the time than it is today. So that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Wow. Yeah. Margaret
um,
Thatcher. I just took a course on that.
Yeah. So what we ended up, what the concept basically was, there was a predecessor to Costco out in California called Price Club.
Wow.
And Price Club was originally acquired by Costco. And what Price Club did, and I'm giving you this background because this is what we developed our concept on. What Price Club did is they bought and packaged goods in economical quantities and sold them at very low margins to the consumer. Same formula today, basically, that Costco is doing. I would say Costco's probably expanded on the concept much further than Price Club did at the time. So the company I was working with at the time wanted to take that same concept and do it for building materials. So we went and found old vacant warehouse properties in Southern California and basically brought in about 10,000 SKUs, stock keeping units, different items that provided all the material for a renovation contractor on a cash and carry basis to come in, purchase these goods, and affordably renovate their homes. So the lessons really learned there was the fact that you got to cater to your current market. And one of the things we did in LA is a very diverse market demographically. So we opened a warehouse in Montebello. And in Montebello, your clientele was Hispanic. So we had, bilingual signage, we had bilingual employees, and we really focused on that. And what was interesting is the typical lumber yards that existed and hardware operations in that market weren't even doing that,
Wow.
they just weren't attuned to their demographic. And when we opened a location in Long Beach, 15 miles away, that had a very heavy Asian influence. So although we didn't have to necessarily go bilingual in that case, we made certain that we were employing, a fair amount of Asians so that people felt comfortable in working in those facilities, et cetera. So that was a huge lesson, right? Understanding really the marketplace, fitting in with the marketplace, letting them know you're part of their community.
Mm.
And what was interesting is during that same period of time, Home Depot did not have a presence in Southern California yet. They had,
Wow.
I think at the time, they might have had 16 to 20 locations, primarily in Florida and the Atlanta area. They started opening operations within 2 or 3 years of the time in which we entered that market. Over the first 3 years that they were in Southern California, about 6 or 7 local chains, lumberyard chains, went out of business.
Hmm.
Contractors Warehouse survived. And I think and we survived, and literally Home Depot opened up in most cases within a mile of our location, and a couple of them virtually across the street. And it was kind of the McDonald's Burger King concept, right? Burger King just went where McDonald's went, saying they did all the research. So we'll
Was
open
that
a
part of your
location.
strategy then at the time?
Yeah. So at the time, that's basically, we had Home Depot, right, breathing down our neck, but we were able to survive because we kept very competitive. We kept very close to the market. And those operations ultimately got purchased at one point 20 years later by Home Depot and still exists today.
What do you think it was about the culture of that organization after that you went to improve it that was leading it to such a loss where you were able to turn it?
Yeah, so what was happening there? It was really a company that was stuck in the way they were doing business in 1970. Okay, Wix had hundreds of locations, usually very secondary but valuable, usually along, believe it or not, railroad lines because they sold lumber and you could get a rail spur and unload the material, get it in competitively. What they didn't do is they didn't pay attention to the changes that were occurring in the market. And the
Wow.
biggest change, interestingly enough, even though it shouldn't have been a factor, was Home Depot and Lowe's coming into those markets. And they dramatically lost a significant amount of what I'll call their weekend warrior business.
Mm.
And so their sales dropped dramatically. They weren't and they didn't adjust enough to be able to go after the professional home builder, right? And that's basically what I focused them on. We went in and said, okay, we're not chasing the weekend warrior or the retail end of the business. We'll welcome them if they come in, but our concept's the home builder. And we really catered the material mix, added a very large sales force and really focused on the services that would help the home builder grow their business.
What was happening in our culture then, like as a country that was either adding or making it harder for home building to happen? Or like, was that, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, was that what I want to know more clearly actually is, was that the home builder, like the professional home builder, was that like a renaissance for that archetype of person versus the weekend warrior at that time, or an untapped market, or was it?
It was one that was typically done, yet it was untapped in one sense, in that there wasn't really a national or regional chain that serviced them.
Interesting.
Independently, family-owned businesses in the market usually took care of that type of business because they could really elevate the service.
Hmm.
So that was the challenge we had with that, was to elevate that service level to be able to compete with the family-owned independent businesses.
How
And we
did
were
you do it?
successful in doing
Yeah,
that.
what made that so successful?
Well, what made it successful, candidly, is perfect segue to your thing, is changing the culture in the company, right? By saying,
Wow.
you know what, we are gonna we're not looking at just being cutting cost. We're looking at adding value. Okay. And they didn't understand that investment and added payroll and personnel costs to them was sort of a detriment heading in the wrong direction, as opposed to my perspective being these are investments and these will help us to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace and be able to attract the builder.
How
Uh,
did you build trust with the organization when you came in? Like, are there certain things that you'd make sure you did? A new
well,
management or
for
something?
sure. I think probably the single biggest thing that I did to build trust, and is something I still do, not as much today. And that is, I call it boots on the ground, right? So I had this thing where if I would walk into the offices or meet some of the regional VPs within that company, because it was a big company at 800 million. And if these guys were wearing, $1,000 Italian wingtip shoes that didn't have any mud on them, I knew that they had no idea what was happening out in the field. And I'm not
Wow.
exaggerating. That's kind of the culture. And mine was, hey, the only way we're going to get through this and reestablish this business and make it viable is if we know exactly what's happening out in the field. So I would say 70% of my time, not behind a desk in a corporate office, but visiting and working in the sites, listening to the management team, listening to people, having contractor dinners. And we did that relentlessly for about a 2 year period. And at the end of 2 years, sales had increased from 800 million to just over a billion. And by the fourth year, a billion, 1.2 billion.
What do you think stops the wingtip shoes from doing that?
I think what they think at the time is, they're an executive. They know it all at this point. They don't need to be out there and be schooled by, their own organization or their clients.
Wow.
And their idea of, I would say, boots on the ground is trying to take somebody out on the golf course for the afternoon, which is okay too. But the point is, the real work gets done on the job site, visiting the job sites. We'd go visit builder sites. We'd pull
Wow.
up, we'd see somebody building some houses and say, hey, who are you purchasing your lumber from? How can we help you? What can we do here differently?
And
And
you enjoy that part of it?
it's the best part of the job, right? Absolutely the best part of the job.
Why?
Um,
Why?
because it was all of that that allowed the company to your point, find credibility in my vision and what I was doing. And candidly, all the managers of the locations, there were 126 locations, were just blown away that you'd come down there and you'd listen to them. And then we'd say, we're going to make changes, and changes would happen immediately there afterwards.
What advice do you have on how to listen to someone that's, rungs below in the hierarchy, in the title, the how would you build rapport?
Pretty easy, truthfully. I wouldn't go in there telling them what I think they need. I'd go in and ask them about their business. What would they change in their business? What is it they would like better support from corporate? And how can we put together a plan to help them do that?
Mm.
And did they get everything, and did everybody have the right vision? The answer is no, but you would end up morphing together the vision, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
Some got it right away and understood it. Others, I won't say fought it, but didn't have the same ability to be able to see, the vision and where we had to go.
What about work ethic? What does it take to do a turnaround like that from a energy standpoint, commitment standpoint? And I ask that specific because our culture is changing. The our listeners have a lot of different outlets to get information about what entrepreneurship looks like.
Yes.
And I
No.
think there's new voices in the room that could use like you can't teach a new dog old tricks, Charlie Munger. I love that quote.
Right.
Say that.
Right.
So, what about work ethic, energy, intensity, or what did it
Well,
take?
no, number one, it takes energy, right? And it takes a belief and total commitment in what you want to do. And in saying that, with a little bit of flexibility, because the truth of the matter is, you're writing the script while you're performing the play. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you're not doing that, I think you're going to hit too many bumps in the road and roadblocks, right? Because I've not been able to lay out a plan on the front side of anything that I've accomplished and said the first outline I had was still valid 6, 8, 12 months later.
But you still do the plan?
Oh, still do the plan. Oh yeah. I'll always have a plan. You got to have a roadmap, right? You got to have a direction that you're headed, and you start executing that plan. And during the course of execution, you figure out where you got to bob and weave and make adjustments. The plan usually doesn't change significantly. It's the nuances, right? And it's the devil's in the details, right? The concept remains the same. The end goal is the same. And the other thing we try to do, we try to set so that, we've got our core values and our mission statement is clear so people understood it. Okay. And I think that's really important. And it can be very, very simple, right? Um, One of the core values that I have for my staff today, as we do procurement for multifamily developers, we treat every transaction as if we're writing the check.
Wow.
Okay. Because it's so easy to pass on problems to somebody else. And it's very common for me to say to one of my staff, if they're making a recommendation and I'm not in agreement with the cost that they think we should be establishing for a specific scope. And I'll turn around and say, if this was your project, would you pay, $12,000 to get that done? And, I don't want to hear, well, that's the best price I could get. That's not the question. Okay. The question is, would you pay it? And the truth is, most of the time there's a pause because they recognize
Wow.
there's probably additional value or another way to approach this.
Is that a sense of ownership you're looking to create or something of that skin in the game type?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of ownership and it's a matter of understanding that survival. And of course, this is very cliche. Survival is comes to those of the fittest, right? So our
Hmm.
fitness in what we do today is to be able to provide undisputable value. I don't want it to be argued where somebody says, well, conceptually, there's this savings there. No, let's make it undisputed value. And then
And
there's
you've done
no
that, whether it's 8 times or 20 times.
correct.
Do you remember where you were where you had the epiphany to start CDK Enterprise? I asked because it looks like your career built up to this. It's the procurement, the people, the relationship, the resources, the planning, all of it kind of builds up to this value.
Yeah, I remember the time. I mean, it was at that role that we were just speaking about at Wix Lumber. And I just made the decision after I felt very comfortable that Wix was on a good path. Um, Sales had increased 50%, right, to 1.2 billion over 4 years. And the company now had pretty solid EBITDA up at like 58 million bucks and a big, big turnaround.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
huge.
yeah. So my plan at that point was I just wanted a new challenge. So I decided to launch CDK, and my original concept with CDK was to provide hands-on consulting services, not white papers, okay? Hands-on consulting, where I would get involved, take on a client, and part of my role would be to help implement the recommendations and the plans that were developed. And that became very, very successful. Um, as I shared with you early on when I mentioned the component framing business with Chicago's largest home builder. It's a classic example. I met with them and said, we can save you a ton of money if you vertically integrate, buy your own lumber, buy your own siding, buy your own drywall. And he goes, okay, we certainly have the capital to do that, but the execution is going to make or break it. And I said, no problem. We'll provide the execution. And it became a
Wow.
really, really valuable and very good relationship for a number of years.
So the from conceptualization to when it came to the execution, what were you looking for? The people, uh, the same concept of getting in the trenches and selling the vision in this or the mission rather, or
Yeah,
both?
Well, in this one, it was a little bit, once I started CDK, it was a little bit different in that the challenge was a little bit different in that I wasn't employed by the companies. I'm consulting with the company, right?
Sure.
So that's the first issue, right? So now you got to win over outside organization that says, who the heck is this guy coming in here telling us how to run our business or make changes in our business?
Yeah, there's apprehension.
There's apprehension. The good news, the guys at the top hired me. So I've got that support, but we had to earn the support
Wow.
going down through the organization. And that was something that I had to really insist and drive home with my organization because they'd often say to me, hey, why don't you pick up the phone and call Ken? These guys, they're not cooperating. I go, I'm not calling Ken. Okay. Ken would certainly back
Why
me.
not? Why not?
And the reason why not is because then you destroy the relationship and the trust with the person down in the ranks that you just basically
Hmm.
called out, right? Went to his boss, the owner of the company, saying they're not
Yep.
cooperating. So I didn't want you don't play the heavy hand. You follow me? You win respect through how you can help them. And, it's the same formula. It was what I indicated, with the previous organizations before CDK. If you can help somebody be successful, chances are they're going to embrace you. And if
Amen.
you're the one who doesn't need to carry the baton and wave it, which humility is a big part of this, right? I don't care about getting any of the credit. I just care about getting the next contract, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
let the organization get the credit. And interestingly enough, when that happens, everything changes because it's not you, meaning me, that's trying to get in there and say, look at all these great things I've done for you. It's me saying, look at all these great things we've accomplished together and you've been able to do.
Hmm.
And hey, you reward them, you help them. They're succeeding. They're getting looked at very highly now in their organization. It spreads.
Wow. Wow. The um what about so right now our listeners that are either directly they're looking to develop apartment complexes or what pre-constructed home like where we live like an HOA type
Yeah.
deal. These are the types of listeners that are, let's say that they're listening or they have relationships with those that are in that space. Where does CDK Enterprises fit in the business plan of, I'm listening and I have worked my whole life to get to the point where I've got this 500 unit apartment complex that we're about to go on. Maybe we have the money, we have the interest, but we don't have as much experience as we think we have, or maybe we think we have more than we actually do. Like, where do you come in that
So,
scenario?
so if you don't mind, I'm gonna step back 1 second before I get to that, and because I want to share conceptually how I got to this place with CDK.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
For the first 25 years of my career, I worked with single family home builders, typically very large national builders. Okay. People like Pulte. Um, you're in Florida, I don't know, DR Horton, Richmond American.
Oh
There's,
yeah.
there's dozens of them. And I worked with all of them. What was unique about the single family national home builders, they had an internal infrastructure that did all their architectural design, that did all of their procurement, negotiating with subs and suppliers, and managing their projects. They were completely self-contained. In 2008, the financial market got slammed. Okay. And banks pull back and literally single family home starts abruptly ended. I mean, it was
Uh,
terrible for the market. Um, we at the time were extraordinarily busy, and literally 2 days after that financial crisis in September, when all that occurred, our phone stopped ringing. We had people calling and canceling projects we were working on. And I'm
wow.
going, wow, we were going 70 miles, 80 miles an hour as fast as we could go, and being asked to go faster
Yeah,
too.
because you started in 99, right? Or 98 or
Um,
2000? I don't.
well, with CDK, I
Yes.
started, 2001. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Um,
Wow.
and yeah, and it went to zero. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I've got to pivot here. And I mean, this was unforeseen, this crash.
Holy cow.
So I looked and said, well, if there's not going to be building single family homes for a while because of the banks pulling back, people have to live somewhere. So I elected to reconfigure my business and focus on providing the same services that single family home builders did internally for themselves, but provided on a contract basis for multifamily developers. And a multifamily developer, there are very few that have an internal pre-construction group that does architectural design, that sets the budgets, that they certainly don't negotiate with subs and suppliers. So what they typically do, a multi, as I researched this back then, here's an interesting stat. 1 out of 12 multifamily projects that a developer has spent anywhere from 100,000 to sometimes $1 million on, only 1 out of 12 saw the light, or went to fruition. 11
Really?
of them died on the vine. And they died on the vine. The primary reason, a little bit of it could have been, local municipalities and not getting the zoning. That was maybe 1 or 2 of the 11 that didn't make it. The other 9 was because the economics didn't make sense. Once they started getting into the project, they spent money to have plans designed, they got approvals, they go out to bid. Their pro forma said we're going to build the project for 25 million. The bids were coming in at 35 million.
Wow.
So the economics didn't work. They died on the vine. Only 1 out of 12. So I said, this is an
Probably
opportunity.
less costly to stop at that point than do something
Well, that's
effective.
exactly it. They just didn't know what to do. And so what my concept at that point was, if I could provide these services, because what the developers, multifamily developers, are relying on is the architect to design an affordable and yet buildable project. The problem is architects don't have any clue, and I say that cautiously, on pricing and the costs associated with things. Um, they think they do in many cases, or believe they do, or might have 10 years ago, but they've never adjusted for change. Okay.
Mm.
So that was number one. Number two, the actual pricing of the project ultimately was done by the general contractor. After the plans were done, the developer said, okay, I'm going to go vet a couple of GCs and have them bid the project. And if the GC came back and he was $10 million over budget, what is the developer to do? Sometimes they'd go rebid with another GC, and maybe it would be not 10 over, it'd be 8 over. It still didn't work. So we started providing these services. And the bottom line is
Wow.
we're not architects. So what we do, we help the architect through the design process on behalf of the owner. So the owner hires us. Sometimes he hires the architect, other times he has us involved with them to hire an architect. And we are involved on a regular basis throughout the course of the project design, making sure it's being designed effectively and efficiently. So that's number one.
Wow.
Number two, we actually will go out to bid as if we're the general contractor at some point during the uh, the plan development process. We might not wait till they're 100% done because we want to get a sense for where the project's tracking. We disclose to the market, we're not the GC, we're bidding this project. All of our bids will be turned over ultimately to the GC that gets hired. And we do this so we can establish a baseline for pricing. And we have several tactics that we use that typically aren't done by general contractors. We separate material from labor because we can buy material typically much better than any subcontractor can. Most subs, very good tradesmen, but they're buying from a supplier that they've dealt with for 20 years and maybe the one that will give them a line of credit. So to them, price isn't the most important issue, it's availability of product. And of course, if they're paying too much for the material, they're passing that on to the general contractor who's passing it on to the developer, right?
Wow, yeah, it creates a huge delta.
Yes. So in essence, to answer your question, if somebody's got 500 units or whatever the case might be, and they're looking to take on a project, I think the single biggest thing is make absolutely certain that your project is designed as efficiently as possible. If they don't have that skill set, they should try to involve a third party to help look at that. You can't 100% rely on the architect. And again, not that they're doing anything that's disingenuous. Everybody falls in their own, I don't want to call it a rut. Have you heard about the expression of being, oh gosh, I just drew a blank on it, successfully stuck? Okay. You're very successful, but you're still stuck. You could be doing better, but you don't think you need to because you're successful. And we try to emphasize that to our clients. Many architects, many GCs, they're successfully stuck. They've got business, they're booking new clients, they've got a backlog, so they're not as willing to make a change.
Hmm.
I view every day as being a day that something has to change.
Why?
Because the world's changing around us, right? And as soon as you think you've got, you've got a competitive advantage and you start to lay back on your laurels, somebody's going to creep up on you, right? Or
So I follow of the 11 when it comes to multifamily development, 11 of 12 projects will die on the vine likely statistically.
correct,
And 9 of those 11, it's likely due to the economics becoming overly inefficient to where
correct,
there's no return or a less return or too little return.
correct.
And do you consider your partnership with these developers a form of accountability?
Absolutely. We have a it's interesting. We have a very large percent of our business is repeat. And,
Wow.
we've done 15, 12 to 15 projects with some of our clients. And the reason for that is we deliver consistent results for them. And we're able to help them achieve their goal, whatever that goal might be. And when we first start working with a client, typically it's because they've gone out to bid and they've got a problem. They budgeted 25 million, it's coming in at 35. What can you do to help? And if we solve that for them, they never go out to bid again the same way they used to. In other words, they adopt our process and we continue to help and deliver projects and help them create the budgets.
Hmm. How much of the material costs and labor piece is like that's not normally separated because like when you were talking about the subcontractor,
Yeah.
they have a relationship that they have goodwill with.
Yes.
They so the it's like there's a quote, show me the incentives, I'll show you the behavior.
Yes.
Like I just if you could unravel that knot a little bit more for me.
Yeah. So, and that's a great point. There's
Like I have a relationship. You said accessibility, right? Okay, I can get it. So that's like get my hands on it and focus on the skill, the task at hand, not necessarily see the whole picture because I'm kind of looking vertically
right,
versus
right.
horizontally or.
But yes, and I think with the subcontractor, they believe they have to have the control because they need the material there, or they don't want to trust somebody else taking care of it for them. They've again successfully stuck. They're getting other projects doing it this way. Why would you want me? Why would you want to buy the material instead of I? Now, in addition to that, they're in they're supported in that role by the general contractor for a different reason. The general contractor wants them to buy the material because then they're 100% accountable for all the entire scope. So if it's a plumbing contractor and he's buying his own plumbing fixtures, toilet sinks, whatever, GC doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't have to handle it. He doesn't have to hear, hey, the delivery is late. He can just hold the subcontractor, excuse me,
Yeah.
accountable. Um, the fact of the matter is, there is a huge savings to separating material from labor. And it means it's a little bit more work for the general contractor. It isn't necessarily more work for the subcontractor. And the opportunity to help save the developer fairly significant dollars exists in doing so. And if you think about that, that's a fiduciary responsibility the GC has when the developer contracts them, is to really deliver him the best overall product or
Mm.
project at the best possible price.
There's a lot of individuals, pundits from the banking and lending sector that come on the show, and real estate sector, sales sector. There's a recurring theme that there's not enough homes being built or had been built. Um, and so right, less supply, more demand, pricing of homes go up.
Right.
So is this a burgeoning opportunity for those that want to get into developments?
Oh, I think absolutely, depending on the market that you're in and the opportunities that are there. I think the government is saying today that we're short something like 8 million homes or some number like that over the next
Wow.
10 years. So, the cost and and actually the longevity of, both multifamily and single family homes, I mean, significant cycle of renovation, probably I'd say every 20 years for sure. And there's a good opportunity for both new construction as well as renovating
Mm.
apartment projects. Um, I saw that you did a podcast there with Vina
Oh,
Jet.
jetty.
Yeah, Jetty. And they purchase existing properties and refurbish them.
Really? Oh, yeah, that was maybe a week ago.
Yeah.
Now, quite actually, I was going to ask about developers. What are some of the values of the most successful developers, or like how they think versus the least successful developers? Because that's a very opaque
Yeah.
kind of.
I
Oh,
I
I'm a
think
developer. Developer of what?
Yeah, right, right. No, I think the successful ones, and there is I can usually tell in our first meeting whether it's going to be a good, successful project, right? They understand the nuances of the market. They understand exactly who their target demographic is. It's not as simple as saying, "Hey, I'm going to go build, an apartment project." Who are you catering to? What's the demographic? How does that fit within your design criteria for studio apartments, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 4 bedroom, depending on where you're at, right? How well have you defined that? And equally as important, how realistic are your performers, your projections, and did you build them from the bottom up, or from the top down? And to
What do
just
you
touch
mean?
on that a little
Yeah.
bit, from the bottom up would be the way we do things. We'd turn around, we would actually take the costs of the project and roll them up without any idea of what the total project cost is going to be. You know, I might have 100 scopes in a project, right? Site work, foundations, framing, siding, etc. And we would individually price those to come up to a total. That's bottom up.
Mm,
Top down, what happens, and I apologize for this little cough.
no worries.
Um, from the top down, what happens, the developer says, no, I got to build it for 25 million. He has no idea what the bottom up costs are, but he's focused on $25 million. And to me, that's usually trouble.
Is that is infer they haven't done the work? They don't know what they don't know.
Could be that, or they're sitting there just trying to back into a number in a pro forma that works so that they know that, oh my God, if it gets to 28, I'm not going to get any more money from the bank. So now I got to raise additional equity. That's going to dilute people that I've already talked to.
Yeah.
Their financial stack isn't working out for them, right? So I think it's a combination of items why they look at that. And partially it could be what you're saying is they don't know what they don't know.
How important in your success was it to go get through that 2008 time? Like
Oh my
what
God,
you learn? Yeah.
the 2008 time actually transformed my business, right? So I don't know that I'd be doing multifamily today if that crash didn't happen in 2008. I had a very successful single family focus. Okay.
Uh,
Although it's still residential construction, they're both very different sectors, right? Um, so, I don't know. In
how did you
hindsight,
pivot? Like when you were thinking of, because I'm thinking you're 7 years in or so to that and
yeah.
succeeding. How do you even think in that? And then you just redid the whole business model. Like, were
Well,
you sleeping?
I believe it or not, I remember the time, okay, because I was actually in North Carolina, right? Because at the time, I was working with a builder, a series of builders out there, and we were helping them produce or convert what's called building components, wall panels, etc. And yeah, the market news came out. All our clients immediately said, including the guys I was out there working with, said, we're just going to put everything on hold. We got to figure out what's going on here. So I'm sitting there going, holy cow, what is it I'm going to do? Okay. And again, assessing the situation, it was directly affecting the financing available for single family homes. Okay. There was no discussion about multifamily or that would be challenging. So to me, it seemed obvious and it really didn't take a lot of time,
Why didn't you quit?
What's that?
Why didn't you quit?
Just quit altogether?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, to quit, then what are my options then? Go out and find a job or something, right? No, I didn't. I turned around and said, you know what? This, where there's dramatic change and challenges, there's huge opportunity.
Hmm. Wow.
And you can find sometimes the greatest opportunities during the most darkest challenges that you have, right? Because you just got to search deep, right? And I wasn't about to do that. I had employees. Um, I was concerned about all of them. I never laid a single one off, which was
Wow.
pretty impressive at that time.
Yeah.
And I just started really pressing hard. Um, I got a lucky break in that one of the building material suppliers that I did a lot of business with had a brother who was just starting to do some multifamily projects. And when I told him this is what I was willing, gonna looking to do, he says, "Let me hook you up with my brother."
Wow.
So I flew out. This was a developer in Montana. So I flew out to Montana like days later and ended up forging a relationship. They were prime. They were very good at financing and marketing, and they had only done one multifamily project before that, but
Wow.
they understood the whole financing aspect and what they wanted to do, but they had no clue about the construction. Um, and it was a perfect match. So within 2 weeks, 3 weeks of all of this happening, I had a client for the multifamily end of things.
Do you think our listeners can become entrepreneurs at any time in their life, or are they born?
Well,
Or I guess I should rephrase, can they learn it or are they born that? Because I guess one could be born it and not and be a late bloomer or something, but or
you
yeah,
know,
so I guess can you
it's
learn it or are you
interesting.
born in it?
I think there's a little bit in your DNA because you got to be risk tolerant. And I think you got to be fearless, because the truth is, I think that's probably the biggest thing that prevents somebody from being an entrepreneur is you leave a stable, guaranteed income, a job, right? And now you got to figure out how you're going to earn a living. And if you end up hiring employees, how are you going to make payroll? I've always shared with those that I've discussed over the time that I've operated CDK since 2001. I've never missed a payroll. And there have been nights that I wondered how I was going to make that payroll. But you figure it out. And
Mm,
um, it truthfully, that's why I say I think it's a little bit in the DNA. You got to be willing to say, hey, I'm a little bit fearless. I'm going to stick my neck out and go after this. Um, and just believe in it and do it. And
mm,
never give up. You asked the question earlier saying, why didn't I just give up or quit? Um, I don't think entrepreneurs quit.
mm.
Okay. You just keep going it. I mean, look at some of the hugely successful ones today. I mean, you look at guys like Elon Musk and Tesla. That thing, people had that written off 20 years ago, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because they just couldn't get the car to work the way they wanted to. How can he fight, the three big US companies that
Uh,
build these in? And you know what? He believed, he was relentless, and look what he's got today. He's the richest man in the world.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
So those that are developing, you come alongside them, you make sure that you figure out where there are inefficiencies and make them efficient in those with those general contractor relationships, and you increase the likelihood of their return many multiples beyond what the investment in you partnering with them is in the first place. And that seems like rooted in the distinction, one of them between materials and labor, which the incentives naturally lead that business to not separate the two. Want to
Right.
make sure I got it. Those
Yeah.
that are listening want to connect with you, Dave, either partner with your organization or they know they have a brother they want to connect with you. That's the fastest way that they can get connected with your organization, CDK Enterprises.
Well, number one, if we want to just use, the website, it's www.cdkinc.com. And you can go right to the website. That's number one. Um, but the reason I want to talk about the website for one moment, one of the things we offer is a free cost assessment on any project.
Hmm.
So if somebody is out looking to do a project and they've got some form of a budget and they've been told you can build it for X and they want a free cost assessment, we'll look it over and tell them what we think, both good and bad. hey, this doesn't look reasonable. I think they're too low on the framing or whatever. Or, wow, we see, $3, $4 million worth of savings here. So
Wow.
that's why I wanted to mention the website. And certainly I'm not afraid to put out there too, I guess, if it's you're asking, is they can call me directly. My phone number is 520-370-6812. And happy to speak to anybody about any project they have going and see if there's a fit in our relationships.
Dave, I really appreciate the insights and clearly you know culture, you've lived culture, so it's amazing to have a real life example of what it is to build a culture that matters. If you're listening to this, share this with a friend that needs some perspective on culture, leadership, and leading by example, and someone that is in this space of construction. And please leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. Shoot Dave a call, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Thanks a lot. And I really appreciate the opportunity, Jason.